Once, there was a girl who was born on the wrong side of the boundary. She did not know it, since that particular boundary was invisible to the eye, and no one talked about it. In fact, no one had talked about it for so long that it didn't seem to exist. Although her family called her Julie, she called herself Fern. Fern preferred to be by herself from a very early age, but you might not know it, since her younger siblings, once they came along, adored her and followed her nearly everywhere she went. She was the second oldest in the family that eventually had 5 children. Whenever she could manage it, Fern went to the edge of where others felt comfortable, or rather, to the edge of where they felt uncomfortable. This was most often where things got wild, deep woods and places with no paths visible to the eye. Her family seemed to move a lot, and Fern always found the invisible boundary wherever they lived. When Fern was 7 or so, she loved going down into the little valley where 2 soft hills met at a trickle of a stream that came out of a huge concrete pipe. When she was not busy helping her mother or playing with her younger brothers, she would somehow always find herself there, making little bridges for the ants to cross the tiny stream, or small houses for the toads and frogs she inadvertently disturbed from their daytime naps. Often, when she managed to slip away and go down the valley, as she thought of it, time would fade or stretch, as if there was none. Then, after a while, her father would come to the edge of the hill behind the house and call, "Julie." She loved the sound of her father's voice calling, and often waited until the second "Julie" before she snapped to, realizing that if she didn't hurry, she'd be late for supper. Sometimes her mother would scowl at her when this happened, but mostly she didn't seem to notice. Her dad, if she caught his eye, would just smile with a hint of a twinkle. Fern wondered then if he knew, but just as quickly as that thought occurred, she'd shake her head and think, knew what? By then, he was conversing with her mother or answering the boys' insistent questions, and her attention was on eating the simple but delicious meal. One day, when Fern was nearly 10 and they had moved into campus housing at a boarding school on the outskirts of a small town, she unwittingly crossed the boundary and was gone for a whole day, though no one seemed to notice. There was a new baby keeping her mother occupied, and for once her older sister was happily minding their brothers. Her dad, as usual, was at work teaching. Fern slipped out the back door, across the backyard, and into the woods. Once there, she wandered along to where some students were keeping an owl, sort of as a pet, but mostly to study it. Just then, there was no one there, and the owl was asleep. She wistfully thought about setting it free, but knew she'd get into trouble. Besides, something was drawing her on. Fern walked, not too slowly, but not too fast, looking at everything. She loved ferns and moss. She found the tiny velvet worlds moss created enchanting. She could have stopped and played in any number of places, but felt the urge to keep going.